conference together in the spirit of collaboration. So we're excited to be here and addressing one unique angle of our work, which is building partnerships.
We had such a lovely introduction. Thank you so much, Clara. We love to share a little bit about ourselves so people really know who we are and why we're here very often. So Andrea and I have been working together probably since 2004, 2005, and we started to conceive our first book project somewhere between 2007 and 2008. And we really met on the idea that we were both co-teachers in our former working lives, and we really embraced this idea of collaboration.
And today, as you heard from the introduction, we're both at Molloy College. So one more big shout out to our institution, where we are continuing to build a collaborative instructional culture as well.
So here's our agenda. We're going to explore the meaning of collaboration for the sake of English learners, and we're going to analyze and apply tools and techniques for building collaborative partnerships.
This is a traditional framework that I think many of us who've been in the field for years or decades are very familiar with, where there are designated specialists, often referred to as ESL teachers, ESOL, ENL, ELL, ELD, lots of different acronyms and names out there. And another very traditional model is when English learners, that's the name that we might be using to describe the students, are removed from the classroom or have standalone services. So with the best of intention, we segregate this population and we're focusing on the 4 main skill areas, which is listening, speaking, reading, writing. And what we're hoping is that this is yesteryear, that this is something from the past.
So now New York State comes along with this word integrated and integrated ENL services. So what does that really mean? So we have to think about what a new paradigm for programs for English learners might look like. And here it is, the idea that no longer are there just standalone classes for English learners or pull-out programs for English learners, that even when those services are still incorporated into integrated ENL, that they are part of the development of them, are part of an integrated collaborative service delivery. So that we always envision these schools having collaborative teacher teams, both ESOL teachers and grade level and content area teachers working together for both the integrated ENL services as well as informing standalone and pull-out services that continue with our entering and emerging students. We think about integrated instructional service so that instruction's never fragmented. So we know that our students often have multiple services. Our students may be students with disabilities. Our students may require AIS services, that these services are also ones that are integrated in ways that the curriculum is one that is cohesive for English learners. Would you like to continue, Andrea?
Sure. Our ultimate goal is that our students have not just a place and a voice, but fully integrated into the student population and into the community. And an important part of that is how we address both the curriculum and the instruction by integrating content and language, as well as social emotional development. So I think it's a good way to end with the conference after we heard the initial keynote speaker, Oakley, talking about science and language integration.
So we talk about partnership building today in the framework of our integrated collaborative instructional cycle, which includes co-planning, co-teaching, co-assessment, and reflection. This framework is one in which we need to address when we're talking about partnership building, because partnership building is not just about co-teaching, or it's not just about co-planning. Those are only pieces of the entire puzzle. We need to make sure that teachers are involved in looking at student work together, assessing student work together, and reflecting on their experiences with teaching English learners.
And we often like to say that you can co-plan without co-teaching, but you can't co-teach without co-planning. So one way or another, we're all participating in effective collaboration. And when we have a workshop setting, we could even try it out with 209 participants here. We like to invite our participants to look at this quite comprehensive definition of what we consider effective collaboration, and then pull out one power word, one concept that truly empowers you when you think about effective collaboration. So we could try that. Those of you who wish to participate in the chat box, just type in what is something that is so important to you when it comes to effective teacher collaboration. And often we have a theme that emerges in these chat responses. A lot of you are, of course, looking at student achievement, being goal-centered, focusing on what's essential. And again, learning and development are also very often words that pop up. What do you see, Maria? Because now we have, I think, dozens of answers coming up super fast.
I think goal-centered was really a lot of the beginning responses were goal-centered. I love these ideas of thoughtful or open-mindedness, communication, flexibility, essential, targeted. Those are all there.
Wonderful. Easier said than done sometimes, right, Maria? Because we need a unique kind of partnership and relationship for all of this to really come to full fruition. So what's your take on this?
Well, interestingly enough, when we think about what's needed for building a partnership, for collaboration, we often think of the different structures here, about the different type of relationships that occur. The first one is networking. And if we were all together at the conference these past 2 days, we would be networking with one another. Networking is kind of the most basic and informal way to share ideas with individuals. It's very low stress. It doesn't require a great deal of trust or a lot of time. It's something we often do. The next step is communicating. It's a little bit more formal way for individuals to share information and ideas. And here we find that people communicate in various ways. Particularly now, we find more people messaging one another, emailing. There's Zoom chats, there's Twitter chats, etc. That's going on. Coordinating involves synchronizing operations or activities in order to make services more accessible and less redundant. So we find that this type of relationship is really key for teams when they're working to support English learners. The next step in really evolving relationships is having people cooperate. So cooperating, there's a higher level of commitment and trust. And here we start to see maybe some generation of ideas and sharing of ideas at this level. The sharing of ideas, resources, knowledge, time, space, as well as students. And last but not least, we have the level of collaboration. And that really develops when people recognize that none can succeed without others.
You know, Maria, what I have seen on Padlet and what I've seen on social media, Facebook and Twitter, I couldn't help but think how under these very difficult circumstances, we were still able to network. Maybe not the same way as running into each other in the conference rooms and in the hallway and browsing resources from our publishers, but instead on social media. And I think there are many, many lasting relationships that are forming just during these 2 days. So thank you again, Nice-T-Sol, for putting this together.
We like to ask people to consider what are they bringing to the table when they're collaborating with one another. So we often do this in our workshops where we ask people to explore what their personal strengths are. So what are your strengths? We often don't brag about what our strengths are. We often, are very silent about what we know and can do. But we are, when we're building collaborative partnerships, we want to make sure that our partners know who we are and what we can do.
And you might have anticipated that on the other side, we might be asking, what are your weaknesses? But instead, what we often like to ask our workshop participants is to think about a unique learning need that you might have. If you could just sit with that other person, what would you like to learn about? And this is a really powerful activity if you could bring it back to your own context. This idea of taking a piece of paper, an index card, or digitally, here is an example what it looked like in a previous conference that we did, jotting down all of your strengths and what you would like to learn in the company of another. So I can't help but think about the time, Maria, when you taught me how to create an iMovie.
We were
And
on the train together.
on the train from New York to Washington, D.C., took about 3.5 hours, but you did it. And I feel that that opportunity to learn in community with somebody else really strengthened both our collaboration. We're able to share our strengths and our needs and learn so much from each other. So we consider teacher collaboration one of the best ongoing job embedded learning opportunities.
So we often talk about how co-teachers, when they're in a co-teaching relationship, really build on their strengths by often taking on different roles and responsibilities. So very often when Andrea and I present together, she leads the presentation. In fact, in the fact that she paces the presentation, and that's kind of her responsibility because she does it much better than I do. I love to go off on tangents. Yet there are times when I truly enjoy the technical part of pulling the PowerPoint together, pulling resources, making it pretty. So I take on the techie job most often. So these are things that occur in partnerships, and they could be fluid. They could be interchangeable, but we find most times that teachers in these teams take on different responsibilities, and usually they keep them. It's decided to, okay.
And again, still in the co-teaching context, we like to share these sketches from Elizabeth Choi, who we met in Knoxville, Tennessee, where she redefined different instructional roles that she has taken on as a middle school co-teacher. Sometimes she felt she was a supporter. Other times she had to be the modeler for her multilingual learners. Sometimes she needed to pay attention to those students who needed some back mapping and some foundational skill building because they needed some additional support to move on with the general education curriculum. So these instructional roles are very fluid that we take on, and we encourage you to not consider co-teaching as something scary or overwhelming or any kind of collaborative partnership that you're in. Instead, consider it as an opportunity to share your strengths and to be creative with the way you define your roles and responsibilities.
We also know that there are many challenges to building partnerships, and we understand that teachers have different beliefs about the nature of learning for English learners, what programs and curricula should look like, what appropriate classroom behavior should be, as well as what are effective activities for student learning. We also recognize that teachers have different teaching styles. Some teachers prefer independent versus cooperative learning. Some have intricate planning where they have to have every detail down, while others kind of fly by the seat of their pants and they enjoy that. There are some people that can multitask, and some people that are linear. They need to do things one step at a time. There's also preferences for sensory modes, such as auditory, visual, or tactual and kinesthetic. So when we're building partnerships, when we find that there are glitches, these are some of the challenges that we have found take place.
So we have summarized some do's and don'ts. We're going to go pretty fast through these so that we could get some other key points that we have prepared for you. So focusing on students, making sure that we recognize that all of our work is about and for our English learners, multilingual learners, and to take a positive asset-based approach to just about everything that we engage in. Also recognizing that everyone is a source of amazing information, resources, ideas, and let's just put whatever we can together for the sake of our students.
We also don't want to be blaming anyone in particular, uh, past teachers, programs, schooling. We don't want to think that we need to do it on our own. We also don't want to be dissuaded by the lack of time.
And some additional pointers that we would like to highlight. Listening carefully to each other, pausing, paraphrasing, and asking questions truly strengthen partnerships in any kind of context, whether you co-teach or not. So you could raise your hand, all 221 of you in this conference, if you agree with me, that at times you've already been formulating your answer to what anybody was talking about before they even had a chance to finish what they were saying. I'm raising my hand because I'm guilty of that. But if we change our own behavior and monitor what we're doing, and rather than trying to already think about the next comeback that we have to present in whatever conversation it is, instead, if we paraphrase and say, Maria, I think I heard you say, and then you say what Maria had to say, and then I'm probing and I'm asking, Maria, could you just tell me a little bit more about A, B, or C? We're still staying in the conversation from Maria's perspective rather than somehow I'm already pushing my ideas. So this is an absolutely critical communication move that we encourage all educators, whether you co-teach or not, to embrace. And some of you who were saying in the chat box here that co-teaching is so difficult, sometimes it's because it's not really the co-teaching that's difficult, but getting starting with that relationship building and communication that's difficult.
And we often say, to build a partnership, you really need to leave your egos at the door. So don't withhold information or resources from one another. You really want to work together to build a relationship and to be a powerful team for your English learners. Don't put yourself or anyone else down, and allow relationships and don't allow relationships to dissolve due to different points of view.
And just as in the chat box here, we also definitely want to recognize that administrative support, leadership support is critical. We need to collaborate with our school leaders, with our coaches, with our community members to build that strong collaborative culture across the entire school building.
And there's so many facets to a collaborative culture, Andrea, as we can see. And some schools may have been able to develop different aspects of their school culture more than others. But we, as professionals involved with working with English learners, need to advocate for a school culture that supports the work that we do.
So here are a few key strategies. So let's start with something informal, maybe something moving into some kind of formal explorations about what does collaboration mean to you in your context? How do you envision collaboration and co-teaching to blossom and grow? And then once we have started those conversations, let's talk about what kind of routines and structures, whether you are in a face-to-face class, in a hybrid setting, or in a fully remote setting, especially now that's coming to many of our schools, we still need to establish routines and structures because that cuts down on the daily negotiations of what's happening next. What are we going to do tomorrow?
Some other strategies for success: discuss issues when they arise. You don't want problems to fester. You really need to address each other in a way that is going to engage one another in positive conversation. So instead of, again, blaming one another or saying you did this or you didn't do that, just using the words "I noticed" and "I was wondering" are two phrases that can really yield good positive conversations. Uh, you really need to request ongoing support for collaborative practices. If you need support, you need to ask for some mentoring or coaching or develop some collegial circles to gain support. And also, it's so important to document your successes and share them with not just among your teammates, but with the entire school.
Sometimes we need protocols. If you feel that things are a little bit rocky at the beginning, or the highly stressful conditions that we try to operate in make it difficult to just have those professional conversations or partnership building taking off, we recommend protocols, such as, I think we have a couple of them coming up on the next few slides. I'm
So
again very, oh no, we didn't, we left those out. So I apologize. So whatever those protocols are, the conversation protocols allow each partner to have a particular prompt to respond to, a certain number of minutes that each person is going to be talking about, typically about students, either students, instruction and assessment data, or about the partnership itself. So it doesn't have to be something very scripted or very complicated, but we often recommend that structures, routines, protocols will help partnerships to take off.
and then building relational trust is really critical to the success of building partnerships. Just take a look of the different facets of building trust. We know that some of these attributes are more difficult to maybe overcome than others, such as overcoming the fear of vulnerability. That happens sometimes more likely over time. We find that teachers sometimes really thrive on joint risk taking, especially when it's successful. And also, relying on each other is another key advantage to having a good collaborative partnership.
You know, it's very interesting, Maria, the word trust, this whole idea of a cornerstone of relationship building has been in the chat box from the moment we started presenting. So of course we were building up to it. And we also agree with all of you who were highlighting the absolute critical role that trust building plays in successful collaboration and co-teaching.
And of course, we also, to close that integrated service delivery for English learners, we want to make sure that we reflect on our practices, reflect on our partnerships, and reflect on the learning of our English learners. Here's one tool that we like to use. It's a self-assessment checklist. And what we love about this in particular is the use of the word we. The pronoun is we. We decide, we share, we identify. These are things to evaluate and decide, are we doing these things well? And if not, what can we do to do better?
This is one of our all-time favorite strategies, 2+2. We'll probably going to practice this right after we're finished with this keynote. 2 things that worked really well, 2 things that we need to work on. Very simple. Doesn't require a lot of time. You could reflect on your own, jot it down, send a text message, or have a quick phone call with anybody that you collaborate with. Always starting with the positive. That's what we really, really strengthened over the years of our collaboration. Whatever happened, we always start with something that's strengths-based and asset-based.
We like to highlight the idea that cooperation and collaboration are 2 different things, that you need cooperation in order to reach collaboration, but in many ways, collaboration is a higher order than cooperation.
And if you were to watch that 83-second video, you would find that John Spencer differentiates between cooperation as something that's critical to get started with collaboration. But when you get to the level of collaboration, there's so many additional factors and features that we definitely need to nurture and work on. What jumps off this page for you, Maria, when you first heard John Spencer comparing cooperation and collaboration? What
It,
struck you first?
what the one that struck me was that although cooperation requires transparency, collaboration requires vulnerability. And that to me is such a much deeper when you are vulnerable to really sharing your honest thoughts and ideas. That's true collaboration.
And you know, the one that really stood out for me is that when we cooperate, we share ideas. So we play nice, we work together. But when we collaborate, when we had that much deeper relationship, then we're going to generate new ideas. So it becomes generative. And that's the real beauty of working together with others. And I think that's the hallmark of our now over a decade and a half professional relationship, that we're still working on something new every time we come together. We're just so excited to work together.
So we'll take any questions if you have any.
I think there was an important question, Maria, if our PowerPoint will be available in the Google folder. And I said, yes, we're going to upload it right after this presentation. So we really appreciate you all being here. And some people were interested in our books. So I'm going to put the link to our Corwin Press books in the chat box in a moment.